Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee, and of course, with me is Milly.
Hi.
And the special guest who will be interviewing today is Frank Paur. Thank you so much for joining.
I'm happy to be here.
So, we are so happy to talk with you today. It's really incredible to delve into your career, especially when it comes to Scooby Doo, which, if you can tell by our background, is quite a big focus on what we do here. But trying to rely on IMDb for a little bit, for all I can appreciate that, it's not always accurate. It lists some of your earlier credits. I was being in the 80s as a layout artist and storyboard director, but before that point, what made you want to work in animation?
Uh, the money was good. I was I was a art and illustration student, and it was a summertime job. You know, there was a studio doing layouts in town, and I started to do those, and it was fun work. I think it was like Thundar the Barbarian was my very first show that I worked on. I was always a big Jack Kirby fan, and I was kind of a geek back then. I still am, but back then even more so. So that was they actually paid me for my work, so that was a plus.
Hmm. And I
And
know,
actually
sorry.
grew from there.
Okay, amazing. And I know that you said certainly, you're an art student and that's kind of what led into things, but were there ever any animated movies or shows that you watched growing up that you think inspired you?
Uh, I was like everybody else. I was a big fan of Disney at the time. Was doing a lot of interesting things. Ralph Bakshi definitely my introduction to Ralph Bakshi was actually uh, Lord of the Rings, uh, and then Wizards, and then you did a few others. I don't recall. I can see them in my head, but I can't recall their names. Uh, so and then I was a big fan of uh, Miyazaki. When I started doing storyboards, some friends brought in some tapes of Castle in the Sky, Laputa. I think that's really it was not that was a different film, but it was trying to remember the American name of it. Anyway, and I was blown away by his work. And from there, I started looking at anime as it came in. I think one of the big things at the time, as a kid, I grew up watching things like, in terms of Japanese, the Battle of the Planets,
Mm.
Mm.
Gigantor, Astro Boy, that sort of thing. And they're very it was different than most of the American animation because it moved around and the stories had more gravitas to the more watered down American version. Even as a kid, I could see that, and it was I kind of enjoyed something out of the ordinary. And when I started working on GI Joe, of course, that was really big action adventure type stuff. They had premiered Robotech, which is of course Macross, and so we had a lot of air, aerial ballets, let's call them, with all the big ships and things like that. And the way they did their animation was completely different than what Americans would do. In terms of Americans worked from like a flatbed system where the camera, everything was riveted down on a big platen, and you could only move the characters left or right, and the camera would take a picture, and they put it on another cell and take a picture, and it was it was Fred Flintstone type stuff. It was right, left, up, down. There's no real dynamics to it, and the Japanese didn't do that. They basically eyeballed everything, which means that you could have these swooping S-type curve pans and things of that nature, which Americans just didn't do, because I think a lot of them just didn't really understand how they could do it. The Japanese were always more inventive in what they could do, than some of the things that we could do. Of course, then there's the comedy stuff, Underdog, the Warner Brothers stuff. Wile E. Coyote was one of my favorites. There's a lot of things like that. And, Saturday morning cartoons was everybody's thing back then. You sat in front of a TV with a bowl of cereal and you watch cartoons all morning.
Oh yeah, that was definitely sounds like such a great time, and on the Japanese animation and anime. I know that one movie that made such an impression on me was Spirited Away, and just going back to all that time and all that era is just so magical, and I just can't stop but marvel at the things that is possible within the realm of animation. And I guess given the fact that you've worked in so many roles such as layout artist, storyboard director, was doing all different aspects of animation always part of your career plan, or did one kind of lead to another?
It kind of lead to another. One leads into another. I had a little bit of an edge because I had studied art, so I understood more than just the standard cartoons that a lot of animators get into. I understand, the value of understanding the importance of color in telling a story. Shading, light, shadow, posing, all that stuff was kind of drilled into me. So I kind of had when I started doing the layouts, it was kind of easy to adapt to do that. And then from layouts, it was just a progressive step to going into storyboards. But I'd look at storyboards, a lot of them are pretty good. And then there are a lot of them I was going, wow, I can do better than that. And I eventually did, but it was a progression. There's a lot of mechanics you need to understand and do. And layout was a great framework for understanding the whole process of how animation gets out and how story is told.
Well, that'll definitely speak a lot to the audience that we have here, because a lot of the people that do come and watch these shows are people that are looking to follow in the career path of whoever we have on the show. And so, in order to help people understand those mechanics, what advice would you give to people watching this that are looking to go into animation?
Are you a storyteller, or do you just like to draw? I mean, because getting into animation, most people think mostly of storyboards. Storyboard encompasses structure. You're basically a storyboard artist is basically a director. Now, all those things I knew in layout and in college and everything, that all came to bear because a lot of those ideas were practical in planning out scenes, staging, blocking. There's just a whole wide range of things that you incorporate in doing it. And of course, drawing is a big thing. You have to love to draw. You can't get away with not doing it. It's knowing how much to put in and how much not to put in as you tell a picture. And today it's even stranger. In a way, it's more convenient because so much is done digitally now that you can edit and direct your own movies basically with just you get Storyboard Pro and some of these other programs out there, and you can really understand animation a lot better because it puts everything together. Before we had to, if you wanted to make an animatic, you had to basically film your storyboards. Today, it's just all on your screen and you can do it immediately. The downside is you do more than you need to do. to tell the story.
Hmm.
But when you do animation, it can kind of take over your brain when you're doing it. Wouldn't that be cool if we just had a little bump here and a little rise here? Because that'd really do something with your character. In animation, we didn't do that. And when we're doing storyboards, you usually don't do that. Sometimes you can if it's an emphasizes a point. Other times, it's you go in your direction, and your director will look at those things, and they'll go on to your sheet timing, and then they'll add, like a 3-second, a 3-frame rest, or then a 5-frame squash, and then 4-frame stretch. You look like you know what you understand. It's come in, down, up. A lot of animation these days, they don't have all the little extras like that. But maybe I'm talking too fast. I don't know.
No, it's really helpful. And I think hearing the element of kind of technology's impact isn't something that we always think about. I mean, I think when I think of a storyboard, I think of somebody drawing a storyboard. I think even, as somebody that's meant to be part of the big technological era, I still don't always see the impact that it can have and that the place that it does have. So that was some really interesting context again. And you're starting to say there about, the role of a director and how they play a part. So you directed several episodes of Scooby Doo and Guess Who before working on the series, because as I'm sure you can tell, we are excited to discuss all things Scooby. How familiar were you with the show?
Scooby Doo or Guess Who?
Scooby Doo, sorry.
I was always a big. Who wasn't a fan of the big dog, Big Dane? Scooby Doo is Scooby Doo. He's internationally famous. You won't find a more famous, more beloved cartoon character than Scooby Doo. You just won't.
No, that's true. I don't think I can think of anybody that wouldn't know the name Scooby Doo.
Yeah.
So I guess, like you said, certainly familiar with it, but I guess, did you ever watch the show? And if so, did you ever get a favorite character? Perhaps even from your time working on the show, is there a favorite character you had to write for or work with?
Well, again, when you're dealing with Scooby Doo, the comedy comes from Scooby and Shaggy. And then from there, everybody kind of revolves around those characters. Velma is another great comedic character, and it's rounded up by Fred and I want to say Stephanie. It's been a while.
There's Daphne just behind us.
Daphne. Is it Daphne? I think we're the redhead, but but the core is Scooby. Everybody surrounds Scooby, and Shaggy and Scooby are kind of married at the hip, so they kind of go together. You can't have one without the other. You can't, but
yeah, no, completely agree with that. And so, do you recall how your work on Scooby Doo and Guess Who, the series, started?
well, as you look through my resume, you see that I've done a lot of superhero stuff. I worked for Disney. I worked on other similar style shows, but they always kind of had an adventure twang to them. Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, I think were the most comedic things that I had done. And then everything else was more like Marvel or DC superhero stuff. And I was just finished work for a friend of mine on a show called Stretch Armstrong for Hasbro. And our production manager on that show had given me a call. I had gotten an email actually from Chris asking me to come in and talk. And he told me all about the show. And, because I'm jumping ahead of myself. I got a call from my ex-production manager, line producer, to do a storyboard. So I did, and this the first was the first one. It was that I had done was Story Divided. It was the Civil War episode.
Oh yeah, the Mystery Gang Divided.
The one with the Scooby imposters.
Yeah, those the Funky Phantom Crew.
Funky Phantom Crew. So I was doing a storyboard on that, and when I turned it in, I got a call from Chris, and he explained the show, and he says, I noticed I'm trying to go for that old Scooby Doo look and feel, that whole left-right system. Remember what I started with, and I was talking about that camera system, how Americans do it? Scooby Doo did all that. And he wanted to do that, and in doing layouts, I kind of knew how to get around certain issues and still make it interesting. And so he really liked that. He liked the fact that I knew old school, and I knew production, and I knew all those techniques. And so he asked me to be a director for him, and and I was like, well, I've always in my thoughts, I've always thought that if you haven't worked on Scooby Doo at some time in your career, if you're in animation, eventually you will, because the show never dies. And that was my turn at the bat at base. Was Chris gave me this invitation to direct for him on his series, and I had known Chris slightly previously, years and years ago, from a 3D movie that we had worked on, and he remembers me from that. And I give him credit, because I didn't remember him much from there, because you're just kind of on different levels. But he remembered me, and he wanted me on the show, and I had to take the opportunity. It was something it was one of the funnest shows I've worked on, simply because it was more comedy. It wasn't all this heavy drama, fate of the world balancing. It kind of gets old after a while. But Scooby Doo is just physical slapstick comedy. It's Laurel and Hardy. It's the Three Stooges. It's all that stuff. Slapstick.
Well, we definitely do love that you were brought on as a director, certainly. Yeah, because I think you did some of our favorite episodes, like the Haunt of a Thousand Voices, the Hex Girls episode. There's just so many that you're involved in that I absolutely love. But I guess I'm curious to know, from that standpoint, once you were brought in as a director, at what point did you know exactly what episodes you were going to be director?
Well, it was the one I was working on, because Chris was, Mike Milo, I think, was already on the team. It's my memory's a little foggy at the beginning, but Chris had just a ton of stuff to do, so he gave me the responsibilities of the Civil War episode, the Funky Phantom episode. So from there, it just kind of, and I wound up doing 17 of them. It was just a lot of fun. Chris, he's a very demanding guy, but he's so good at what he does. You have to just, appreciate his sense of timing and comedy and everything else. I learned a great deal from Chris on that.
I mean, all of you collectively made a great team. It was a fantastic show. And do you remember what did directing an episode entail? What was the process like?
Well, you get the script first. You usually, and we had an in-house crew, and essentially you would sit down, you as a director, you sit down and you break the script apart into various sections, and you work with your artists, so you kind of have an idea what they do. So you try to, some people do it a little differently. I always kind of do it in terms of sequencing. So I'll split a show up in sequences. Some people just like to say, well, I got 3 storyboard artists, here's act so and so, do act 1, do act 2, do act 3. But sometimes elements within those acts overlap, and I like to get, if somebody's working on this element in act 1, I want him to do this element in act 3 when it goes back to it. And so I when I break it down in sequences, I can kind of have a clear vision of who's right for each particular piece of action. Some people are more prone for comedy action, some people are more prone for slapstick, and so you want to try to get people to do their best work on it. So that's how you kind of split it up a little bit. And then once you have that down, then you have a meeting and you have a read through with your storyboard and your production team storyboard, so we know what's all there. So the character people know what's in store for them. Storyboard people, we can hammer ideas out at the table. You know, if something comes up, we can say, you know, what if he comes in left here and does a little slip on a shoelace or something like that as he goes into this. These are things that we kind of play out, and if they work, you know, then it's stuff that needs to be directed toward the actor doing the role. If there's a physical gag happening while he's doing it, they have to know that so they can react accordingly. But it's kind of a way of hammering things home to everybody and putting everybody on the same page creatively. That's how it usually works.
Mm. It certainly seems like there was a really good sense of teamwork and, like you say, everyone having their role and also getting to know individuals as well. I mean, I do think that the team behind it is what makes this such a good series. And I know there's a photo on Facebook of you with the voice cast and also some of the other creatives such as Mike Ryan, Chris Bailey. Do you have any favorite memories from working with the team?
You know, nothing pops out. I mean, once you start doing a show like this, it's more like controlled chaos. So there's a lot of weird things happening all the time. And you're managed, since you're a director, you have to manage that. You have to deal with the artists, and you have to deal with Chris. You have, you know, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff you have to do. The biggest things in doing these shows, and again, Scooby Doo, it's the romp.
Yeah.
Show without a romp, and you know what, we had 50 episodes or something like that all together. That's a lot of romps. So how do you make it interesting? So coming up with those ideas, where it was always kind of fun, because then of course Chris, you know, once we would go through it, Chris would come in and he'd have his own type of take on things. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? You know, I mean, he just get right to the point on this stuff, and it was always, you know, it was a refining process, and those are the things I remember most. Because I mean, yeah, it's a lot of fun, but you know, it's a lot of work too. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, it definitely does. I mean, you can see it on the screen, really, the amount of time everything took, and just hearing from you and everyone that we've spoken to that works on the series is just such a testament to that. And for all you said that everything kind of just blends into a sense of controlled chaos, is there a particular episode or maybe a couple of episodes that you directed that stand out to you as being one that you maybe look back on with a bit more fondness?
There's a few. The first one obviously was a challenge. I don't think it was my best one, as I was still kind of getting in the rhythm of the comedy thing. But hold on, let's see. I have a list here of things I kind of at my disposal. I'm kind of looking at. There's a couple. But I did the one, and then First Cabinet. Las Vegas. No, that's not it. Purple. Pash's Fastest Food. No, that's not it. I wanted to do What a Night for a Dark Night because my family. Chris
Yeah,
and
I can imagine.
Looking for one particular thing. Fear of the Fire Beast, the Steve Buscemi one, was one. Because it's Steve Buscemi. Come on. It had a very unusual romp. We kind of had a is it Aaron Chen was our storyboard guy that worked on that section. I just want to make sure because it's been a while since I've worked with. Yeah, it was Aaron Chen. But he did this thing where it's the romp, but instead of the hallway, we're dealing with all these different halls and things, and it's like an Escher piece. So it was just so bizarre, the things, and it was simple, but it was such an unusual thing. I remember that a lot because it was a great solution to the romp that we did, and it was completely different, but it was the same. And so that's the kind of stuff you look for. So that one comes to mind a lot. And the other one is the Wedding Witch of Wainsley Hall, Jeff Foxworthy episode. I couldn't go through in-house people on that, storyboard guys with that. So I had some friends that had worked on Scooby Doo previously, like Mitch Schauer, Chuck Patton, and we brought them in to do the storyboards on it. And it was tough at first, but it was the standard. They investigate a southern haunted mansion, and that's just kind of irresistible. Just in terms of me, who used to do a lot of layouts, the designs and things that you can come up with, for that sort of thing was a challenge and was a lot of fun. And it turned out being, I think one of the better episodes, I think, in terms of everything. But it had a rough start, is what I'm saying. But ultimately, it turned out pretty. Everybody was pretty happy with it.
I mean, yeah, that definitely includes us as well. Because just hearing you talk, then, you've mentioned episodes that have so many incredible guests as well, like Penn and Teller, obviously Steve Buscemi, who I'm almost embarrassed to admit that my main background with him was Randall in Monsters Inc. and also in Spy Kids 2. That's kind of where my knowledge of him comes from. But is there like a celebrity or public figure that you can think of that you wish that you could have directed an episode for?
I think with Steve Buscemi, I think of him as an A-list actor,
Mm.
but he doesn't treat himself like an A-list actor. He just, if I like it, I'll do it. On this one, we made fun of the fact of his, everybody was terrified of Steve Buscemi because of his role playing the mobster in Boardwalk Empire. And he was a very malicious and scary guy, but he's still Steve Buscemi, and he had to convince everybody that he was a nice guy. And everybody is, no, Mr. Buscemi, no, that's okay. I thought it was just a really fun little story. And he just, I think he had a lot of fun doing it, so I think everybody who works on Scooby has fun doing it.
Yeah, certainly. And some of the episodes you've mentioned there were so well received as well, but there is one episode in particular that I think is kind of regarded as a fan favorite, and that's A Haunt of a Thousand Voices. So I know that you said some of the work that you were doing, it was kind of like chaos, but can you differentiate some of the things that were from working on that episode and what it was like to be part of it?
The Frank Welker episode.
Mm.
I've worked with Frank for years, and he was Bronx, on Gargoyles, I mean, and he did other miscellaneous, but he was Bronx. He always brought character, personality to absolutely everything that he does, and he's just a joy to work with.
Mm.
So when it's and this is kind of, in a way, it's a love letter to Frank. And like I said, I've known him for years. I've had the pleasure of having him on many of my shows, and so it was kind of gratifying to do this homage in a way.
Mm.
It had all the elements of the haunted cast, and we made fun of his success, the giant palace and the overlooking the ocean and all this kind of, his in-house recording studio, little things like that. But it was just kind of, ultimately it was a very sweet episode.
It really was. Do you remember where the idea for it came about?
Oh, you have to ask Mike Ryan for that one. It just came up on my desk one day, and the script came on my desk, and I think it was the last episode in the series, which was sad because we all wanted it to go on for another season or two, but we didn't even know if it was, the way Warner's was at the time, really know whether or not what was going on in terms of their structure and everything, because there's just a lot of stuff going on at the top with the big guys.
Oh yeah, and I think there still is to this day. It doesn't really seem to be showing many signs of settling, but we are just so glad that that episode did show up on your desk. And I think logistically, a question that I have on that front is, were there any highs and lows of directing that episode, given that it was the gang enacting with their voice cast versus almost like a third party celebrity guest coming in?
Not really. Not to me. It was all. I mean, maybe Chris has a different view of it. I was not at all the recording sessions for the series. He was very involved, and I have a great producer. He's a great voice director. So I never really worried about stuff unless I needed to be there for something. I would always kind of let that off because I had other things that I had to prep for the next incoming shows and everything. But they all have a brilliant sense of humor. They all saw what it was, and they all loved it. Because it's still, even though it's more about Frank, it's about really all the characters too. And so they kind of got into the spirit of the whole thing, and they always do. We have, we had the best Scooby cast you could ever ask for. Smart, witty, just a joy to work with. I was very lucky to have all of them. So it's they might think differently because I never really talked much with them, but they all seem genuinely pleased with everything. So
I mean, they all definitely sound in the performance.
It's a hard question for me to really answer because there's people have their own ideas of how these things are, but from my point of view, there was never an issue with any of them.
Oh, well, that's fantastic to hear. It definitely is always good to hear that and just to hear all of the great times that were had making such a show that we love so much. And Speaking of things that we love a lot,
Mm.
one thing that we love is the Hex Girls. I think they've kind of become our favorite reoccurring characters ever since their debut in The Witch's Ghost. And I know you said on Facebook that you'd pitched a series idea for them that was halted due to the pandemic. Do you know what that show would have been about, and if there's any chance of that being picked up at all?
My version?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Mm.
Not my version. My version was really wild. But because I remember having a talk with Jay Bastian, and I was saying why don't we do a series on this? Because I was talking to a friend of mine who's a composer, and she's goth. She's a goth gal. Reagan Mozingo. And I was hoping that we could get her to do some original stuff to it, and that never really worked out because they had other things going on. But she told me, she says, there are like 10 million hits on the Hex Girls. They're as popular as Scooby Doo. And I brought that up with Jay, and he was like, "Oh, well, what kind of thing could we do?" Well, so we could do an origin story. And he goes, "Yes, we could do an origin story," because they have no origin in the show. They just these vapid kind of characters, and we could actually ground them into somebody a lot much more deep than who they are. So we kind of started with that premise. And I had talked to Mike Ryan about some of the ideas, and we put together a little pitch and sent it out, and then Discovery bought everything, and everything got put on hold, and we never heard more about it.
It is a shame, and there's so many good concepts. That have been one of them that we would love to see them go back to and pick back up, because I don't think there was ever enough recognition for the Hex Girls. We got to see them a few times, but we'd love to see them so much more.
I would say that eventually they are going to have their own series. I can't see why they wouldn't. I think it's just a matter of time. Because they are fun characters, but I just don't think that they've. We were doing the storyboards for them. We were doing the work on the show. There is so much opportunity to fill in the gaps, the missing places. Why are these characters like this? And this is just who they are, but there's always a reason you are the way that you are, and that's what makes them interesting. There's a certain mystery to these characters that we have, and that makes them interesting. And this would have had a minimal explanation, because you want to start something, but you want to build from it, and I think it'll happen. It's just I'm pretty sure it won't be through me though. So, but I would love to do it.
That's a shame, and we do hope that if they ever do want to do the series and you get the opportunity to do it, that you would jump on board, because certainly I think from what you're saying, you would make that project absolutely shine. I'm certainly interested in it based on what it is that you've been saying. But with that being said, have you got any upcoming projects that you can talk about?
There are things that I'm pitching that that I can't really say much about it, because I don't know if they're going to go anywhere or not. There's a lot of that right now, because the industry, animation industry right now is in kind of a strange flux, because it seems to be retracting. With all these streaming services spending all these huge gobs of money, and not getting the results that they had hoped for, everybody is scaling back on things. So until that settles, bringing up new concepts and ideas is very difficult. One of the things I've been doing, I'm doing a series of illustrations. This is just one for my own. Doing a series of illustrations based on Damona's 1,000 Years. Now, you're familiar with Damona from Gargoyles.
Oh God, yeah. I'm not
Mm.
sure about Damone. I think I know it to see it, but not
Yeah.
necessarily know it by name.
No.
There's a, here's a character from Gargoyles. She's cursed. She's lived 1,000 years. She's a villain. But where was she in that 1,000 years? And I thought it would be kind of fun to do various illustrations highlighting that path that she took. And if you're a Gargoyle fan, it's like they love this kind of. I just finished one drawing. I don't know if I can show it to you. It's kind of difficult. You'd have to go on Facebook. If you saw Facebook, I think you put it on Facebook the other day.
Yeah, sure. I can grab that and edit that into the video here. So,
Yeah, so everyone can see it.
Thank you.
And you're mentioning there your Facebook. Is that the best place for people watching to keep up with your work and upcoming projects?
I do have Instagram, X, LinkedIn. I have those places. Mostly it's Facebook. But I have a lot of different things I've been doing. I mean, again, the last year I was working on with Mike Ryan on a project that would have been a blast, supernatural thriller, but it didn't happen. Between the strike and the industry the way it is, I started work on it, then I had to stop work on it. So there's been a lot of that sort of thing going on. So I do these other things because, I got to keep busy. And there are other things. Again, I have other projects that I've been pitching that are constantly in a work of being reworked. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll definitely be looking forward to keeping up with that, and of course, letting other people keep up with that as well. So we will leave the links to Facebook and X in the description down below. But yeah, that does conclude all of the questions that we had for you today. Just thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for all the time that you've given us today, because we've really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, thank you. It was fun.
Thank
I
you.
talked over myself too much.
Oh no, it's been absolutely fantastic, and we know that the people watching this will have enjoyed it as well. Scooby Doo and Guess Who is a very popular series to discuss on the channel and just in general. So thank you so much to everybody for watching. If you do want to see more, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.